Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on inclusive practices for faculty recruiting. We will give it about 1 more minute to allow for more people to join in before we get started. Thank you. All right, thank you for joining us and welcome to our webinar on inclusive practices for faculty recruiting. My name is Evangelia Bellas. I am the BMES Diversity Committee Chair and I will be moderating our session today. Before we begin, I'd like to say that I hope you're all doing well. It's been a rough year and we've been tested in ways that we probably never imagined. We know this year has shed light on disparities at every level of both our professional and personal lives. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the 513,000 lives that were lost already to COVID in the United States, which we know is compounded by things like overt racist actions against Black, Brown, and Asian Americans in our community, and then further compounded with things like severe power outages and freezing temperatures like those that happened recently in Texas. Let's take a moment. Thank you. And while every day seems to bring a new struggle, I hope that you find ways to take care of yourselves so that we can continue to build a stronger and more equitable future for our BME community and beyond. So we all know that diversity, equity, and inclusion are important at many facets in our careers and our communities. So I won't belabor that here. Last year, many of us saw how the University of Florida Biomedical Engineering Department brought on a rocking new set of diverse faculty, and it made me wonder how they did it. So I reached out to them and I learned a bit more about their process. Today we assembled a panel with Greg Hudala, who was instrumental in that University of Florida BME hiring, along with other BME leaders, Shelly Sakiyama, Elbert, and Erin Lobeck, who have successfully advocated for inclusive practices in hiring. We'll give them all a chance to introduce themselves and some of the related practices before getting into the Q&A. After the introduction, we will pose questions to our panelists, as well as take questions from you, our audience, in the question and answer box. Please feel free to ask the questions at any point throughout the webinar, and if you prefer, you can direct them to a specific panelist. Greg, would you care to start with your introduction?
Sure. Thanks for your introduction, Leah. I'm Greg Hudala. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Florida. I've been at the University of Florida for just about 8 years, over which time I have served as both member and chair of our faculty search committee. So as Leah suggested, my involvement here today is to hopefully shed some light on some of the things that me and the team of folks who I've worked with on the faculty search over the last couple of years have implemented to increase diversity and foster inclusion in our hiring practices. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Greg. Shelly?
Hi, I'm Shelly Sakiyama Elbert. I'm professor of biomedical engineering and the department chair at the University of Texas at Austin. I've been department chair there. This is my 5th year now. So in that role, I've been working with our faculty search committee to refine and improve our practices to make our hiring processes more inclusive, especially when we think about recruiting faculty at the senior level, which is an area that I think many of us struggle to make sure that we're having a more inclusive and a more diverse pool of candidates that we're considering.
Thank you, Shelly. Erin?
Hi, I'm Erin Lobeck. I'm the Associate Dean for Research and Faculty Development in the College of Engineering and IT at UMBC. And with my fellow Associate Dean, Helena Mentis, for the past few years, we have been working to really rethink our hiring at all levels across our departments and really try to build in best practices to diversify the faculty and better reflect our student population.
Thank you to all our panelists for their introductions. So now we are going to get into some of the questions. So again, you are welcome to put questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to them throughout the webinar. But to start us off, I'd like to ask all of you, what have you changed about your job posting advertising processes to increase diversity? With a obvious sort of caveat that if you don't have diverse applicants, you can't actually increase diversity. So we can maybe get started with Greg on this one.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things that we have done, a big concern for us is emphasizing the applicant pool, right? If your applicant pool isn't diverse, then it's hard to have diversity on the backside, right? And so, working toward concerted efforts to ensure that our job ad and our application process is accessible, known by a broader spectrum of folks. I think historically it had been primary efforts had been sending out the job ad through the BMES portal, for example, but not everyone's a BMES member, or not everyone sees those announcements, right? And so taking more of a grassroots effort to reach out, find candidates maybe more organically by engaging across different professional societies and engaging with folks that we know who have done a good job of training diverse candidates, right? So word of mouth is a great form of advertising, albeit sometimes slow, but that's been a really effective strategy for us for simply increasing the diversity of applicants to our program.
Thank you, Greg. Shelley or Erin?
This is Shelley. I can jump in here. I was going to add that another thing that we've really focused on is trying to do a little bit broader searches in terms of the research areas that we're recruiting in. So rather than having one small and very focused research area, trying to have several areas that we're interested in so that we can cast a broader net and get more people interested in the search. I think sometimes people worry that they don't fit into exactly the topic that's listed in the posting. And I certainly encourage everyone who reaches out to me that might fit into the broadest version of that listing to apply. But I think that's really important, is to have broader searches. And the other thing we like to emphasize, and I think Erin mentioned this earlier, is that for us it's really important to build a broad and inclusive department that reflects the diverse nature of the state that we live in. So Texas is a very diverse state, and our student population is also very diverse. So we really want to reflect that in our faculty as well. So emphasizing the importance of that in our ads.
I think another thing we try to do, or we're trying to do more accurately, is really trying to convey that there is no search season. It's not something you search and then you can just put your feet up until the next time you have to search. It really should be, a continual process of outreach. The biggest way that we get diverse applicants to our pools is personal connections. And so really building networks, maintaining networks, it's good for lots and lots of reasons in research, but it really helps when it comes time to do a search to reach out to networks and talk to people personally and say, we really want you to apply. That makes a huge difference.
Thank you. So I think what I'm hearing from everyone is sort of the same kind of basic echo in terms of, it takes a bit of work. It's sort of a grassroots effort, and it's a continuous effort throughout the entire year. And so I think that's really useful. It's not, it sounds like it's not just about posting and then leaving it sort of to happen magically on its own, that it's really a lot of work on the grassroots level. And there's a related question in the chat that said, have you changed the specific wording in the job posting itself? Are the ads and search process uniform across your college or university? And that's from Leslie Chow.
So this is Greg. This is a great question, Leslie. So yes, we have changed the specific wording to some degree in our job posting. So I think a primary emphasis, and there's actually another question about this in the chat, is that we no longer, or we do our best, right, to not solely emphasize research productivity and research potential of the candidates in the process. We're looking for more than that, right? As we all know, by simply focusing on research, that introduces a significant bias in the screening and the evaluation, the interview process. And so we've carefully crafted our job posting to emphasize that while the research productivity and potential are important, the other aspects of the application package also carry major weight, right? And the easiest way to do that is to just ensure that the commentary on the teaching statement and diversity, equity, inclusion statement is not just a line or a couple of words on the page, right? But actually encompasses significant landscape in the job posting itself. And I think that coupled with seeing that these things matter at a program helps instill confidence in the candidates that these metrics actually matter, and they do, right? These metrics are central to our decision-making process. I don't know that the ads and the search processes themselves are not, at least in my instance, uniform across our college or university. So, there is some oversight that happens with regard to the job posting, but each program sort of operates as an independent machine, which isn't great, right? I think that, an important step forward would be normalizing this process, identifying best practices across the group, and, implementing those strategies more collectively. I think we would likely see diversity improve more holistically as opposed to maybe within specific disciplines within our college or university.
This is Erin. I agree with Greg's assessment. In our college, we've worked hard to try to make it uniform across departments, but there are departments that are really forward-thinking in how they do it, and they're innovating, and they're trying new things, and they're trying to figure out new ways to be more inclusive. And then there are departments for whom it is a work in progress, and it's something where they're still trying to figure out how they view research and diversity. I mean, the reality is all the data says that diversity enriches research and makes research stronger and better. But, for those who have done things one way for a long time, it takes a while to get them on board.
This is Shelley. I think the one shift we've made is really emphasizing in our ad the importance to us that candidates can deploy inclusive practices in their classrooms and also in their research labs. And so that's a piece that we've added to the ad specifically.
Thank you. So we'll go to a second sort of related question. I guess, after we're thinking about the job posting and the advertising, obviously then we have to screen the candidates, and often there's, a handful in the hundreds of candidates for a single job opening. So when we think about that, process of screening, especially sort of at the early stages of screening, what have you changed about your screening process that would help increase diversity? And anyone can take this first, but I would like to add there is a question in the chat that is related to this, and they ask specifically, when you have 200 plus candidates for a single job opening, how do you go about selecting a long list of 10 to 20 people without relying on numerical metrics like H-index or number or impact factor of publications, which may reduce the number of URM candidates that make it to the long list? So I'll open it up to our panelists.
So I can kick things off.
Oh, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. So this is Greg again. So I will say, I think one thing that's been instrumental in our efforts is building a committee. So the candidates are evaluated by committee, right? And one of the things that we've done is build a committee that shares I don't want to say the same perspective, but the same drive, right, to improve diversity and ensure equity in the process, right? And so, what that does. So Erin mentioned, right, in her college, one of the challenges has been getting programs that have done things the same way for a long time to change, right? And that's true in young programs as well, right? And so, you have people that are sort of locked into their way of thinking about these processes. And so by building a committee that shares the same values, right, that shares the same commitment to these efforts, you have not a single voice in the room, but a cluster of voices that are echoing the same perspective, right? And so reminding the department that we want to look at more than just research. We want to look at the whole candidate, right? And so, that takes coaching, and that takes repetition. But within the committee itself, one of the things that we did to sort of circumvent the bias of research first was I encouraged all of the committee members to not review the research statement first, but instead review the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement first, right? And use this as a way to sort of set the stage. If this is really important to us, if this is a driver for us moving forward, we should be first and foremost seeking candidates that share our vision, right? That share our drive in that space. We see a lot of really, really strong research proposals in the 200 plus applications that we may review. But what we're really looking for is not just research prowess, right? We're looking for the whole candidate, right? And to do that, we've recalibrated our screening process, right, and developed rubrics, right, and metrics by which we evaluate. Do these candidates share our perspective on DEI practices? Are they going to actively contribute to these efforts, right? Because the only way that you build in this direction is by ensuring continued effort in this space. So that's been the biggest change for us, is sort of, trying to change the convention and the perspective on what we value as most important in the recruiting process.
This is Erin. So, sorry,
Go ahead,
Shelley. So I just wanted to say we borrowed that from Greg, and it has, and again, our forward-thinking departments have really embraced it and found it to be very transformational in how they think about things. But the other key thing that we've done is have students on the committee as voting members. And this, and so having students on the committee has really, I think it's helped people to rise to their better selves sometimes and to really think about, we need to change what we're doing because we need to make sure that we are coming, including the whole person and people who connect with our students in different ways. So, and the students are, when we have students that are selected by their communities, particularly the undergraduates in our program, they are deeply vocal and deeply passionate, and that has been very helpful. If you do end up including students on your committee, I do recommend that they not be the graduate students of the committee members. They tend to be understandably quieter, and if you don't get the same perspective.
This is Shelley. I think these are both really helpful sets of ideas, and we've used some of those as well. One trick that we tried this year to help shift that mindset that Greg was talking about, to think about the diversity in teaching as well and have a more holistic application review. And this was Elizabeth Cosgrove Hernandez, who was our amazing search chair this year. This was her idea. We had the candidates submit the statements in a different order. So diversity statement first, then teaching statement, then research statement in their application package. And so if you just open the application file, right after the cover letter, it's the diversity statement. It's, it's all in one PDF. And so you automatically read that first. And that actually, I think, was really helpful. And as we were reviewing the applications, then we had the search committee score on diversity, teaching, research. Are the candidates not meeting expectations, or exceeding expectations for each of those areas, and then an overall assessment score, so that and you had to enter all 4 of those scores for each application you were reviewing. So I think it really helped people think holistically about the candidates as they were reading the applications. We didn't tell people how to weight those 3 categories into their final score. So I think everyone did weigh things, in their own way. But I think it really did help to have people just approach it holistically. The other key thing that I think was really helpful was having the committee, before we started reviewing, agree on the criteria for each of those categories. So what were we looking for in applications, and how could candidates demonstrate that they were meeting those expectations? So having, sort of a rubric for review. But then we shared on our website with the candidates what were the things we were looking for in each of those statement areas, so that they would have a better idea of how the statements were being evaluated. And I think that transparency and guidance is really helpful to everyone, but especially to candidates that might not have as strong of a network to lean upon in terms of what are these statements supposed to look like.
Thank you all for those answers. And we have sort of a related question in the chat from Michelle Grimm. She asks, how have you changed the expectations of your department faculty as well as the higher-ups to accept and hopefully really buy in to the fact that a broader assessment of the candidates is warranted, i.e. research is not the only thing?
So this is Greg. Happy to jump in here. So this is a terrific question, Michelle. And again, I think it aligns with a lot of what we've been discussing already. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to sit as an external member on a search committee that was happening in the polymers group in our Department of Chemistry. And one of the things that one of the search committee members said during one of our early meetings really resonated with me, and I've carried it forward. They said, when you get down to, maybe your top 10 to 20 applicants, the committee will oftentimes try to rank them, right? And it's nearly impossible. When you look at the candidates holistically, it would be very difficult to parse out who's number 1 versus who's number 2 versus who's number 3, right? And so, you have to, if you really want to identify the candidates that are the right fit for your program, you really have to, again, look more than just the research, right? What do you want your department to look like? How do you want your department to operate, right? And taking a really in-depth and detailed look at what were historically the ancillary statements in application packages, the teaching statement, as Shelley mentioned, and the DEI statement, really become the spaces where candidates who have historically not been represented well in these programs can really shine, right? They are the candidates who are oftentimes committed to these efforts, because these efforts, in whatever limited capacity they may have existed in the past, have helped these candidates get to where they are today, right? And so they see this as an opportunity to continue improving upon things. So it in our experience, it's become almost kind of natural to shift in this direction. It actually helps us distinguish which candidates are the right fit or not by looking more holistically at the individual and their application package. And then, we'll talk about this, I think, maybe a bit later, when we bring them to interview, stressing to them that in the interview process, they shouldn't only focus on the research, right? Providing them with opportunities to talk about more than just their research interests, right? Talk about their efforts in DEI, talk about their teaching interests, and explain how those collectively will fit into the culture of our department and help us grow in the direction that we want to go. So that, for us, I think, has been the strategy that's been effective for taking off the blinders of research only or research first, and really starting to view the whole candidate.
This is Erin. I just wanted to comment on the part about having the higher-ups buy in. I think, Michelle, you're absolutely right. If the higher-ups don't buy in, it's fraught to try to move things forward. Assuming you have a successful search and bring someone in, they tend to get isolated. You don't have the infrastructure to support and include people in an intentional way. I think, for us, we're very lucky. Our upper administration buys in, but certainly some of the interim administration between the upper administration and us sometimes, questions, is this really the right thing? How does this help us grow research? And for us, it's been about the data that we've been, when we present the data, it does help. And also when we present the data on our students and the diversity of our students and how important it is for retention of students to have a diverse faculty, that has a big impact in getting the buy-in from the leadership.
This is Shelley. I want to echo, what Greg and Erin have said. I think when we think about, how can we incorporate these pieces and how can we really get buy-in, for us as a big public institution, we really value, in addition to excellent research, excellent teaching. And that's something that's really part of the culture of the university. It's something that's very seriously evaluated in tenure and promotion. And so part of good teaching is inclusive teaching. So looking at candidates that are excited about teaching diverse groups of students, for us, is really critical. And so realizing that that's a critical piece for faculty to be successful, I think has helped to get the buy-in. And also realizing that student retention and student success is really dependent on feeling like they're a part of the culture, like they belong. And so I think that, that is something that's also very important to the higher-ups and highly valued. So understanding how those pieces translate down into diverse recruiting, I think, has been a good strategy for us.
Thank you. So next, I want to go back to one of our original questions, which is a little bit more of a broader question, and then we'll go back to some of the questions in the chat. But what have you changed about your interview process in order to increase diversity? And we touched on a few smaller parts, but was there any sort of big efforts made towards changing your interview process?
So I can kick things off again. This is Greg again. So one of the things that we have noted over the years is that occasionally, not always, right, but there are clear instances in which candidate effectiveness during the interview can oftentimes be related to the quality of the mentorship that the candidate has received before they've interviewed, right? And so, you have some places that are very, very good about providing mentoring opportunities for candidates on the job market, helping them craft their quote-unquote chalk talk, right, and prepare their research talk, and really training them to understand what to expect, right? But this isn't the case universally. There are many candidates who will show up at their first interview and they have very little knowledge or insight into what the process is going to look like. So one thing that we have implemented that I think has been effective, at least through the conversations I've had with our recent hirees, was an effort to really level the playing field, right? And so, the way that we've done this is that as soon as we've identified our short list of candidates who are going to come in and we start scheduling their interviews, I actually call each and every one of the candidates, or at least I offer to, not all of them take me up on the offer, but I offer to have a phone call with each and every one of the candidates to talk to them about what the process is going to look like, right? What should you expect when you show up on campus? Who are you going to meet with? What slide decks should you prepare? What conversations should you be ready to have, right? And I do this over the phone because the conversation feels more natural, right? It feels more organic. It's not passing emails back and forth that can happen at odd times or sometimes come off as being terse, right? And it's an effort to sort of open the door and say, look, we want you to succeed in this process, right? We want you to show up and interview really, really well. So we're going to try to eliminate as many barriers as may exist in front of you before you show up on campus. We want to make sure that we're looking as best as possible at each and every candidate on the same level, right? And so that's one major change that we've implemented that, again, is really intended to provide equal access to all candidates. The other thing that we've changed, a couple of minutes ago I said chalk talk, and I made air quotes, right? I said quote unquote chalk talk. We've tried to move away from that culture in the interview process, right? So there's sort of an unwritten rule with the chalk talk, is that it can be sort of aggressive, right? And it tends to be heavily research focused, and you'll oftentimes use that as an opportunity to really grill the candidate and figure out what they do and don't know about their space, right? And I think it's important, right, to hear the candidate's research vision and to question them about, the fundability and the impact, the significance of the research program that they're proposing. But again, if you lean on a tool like the chalk talk that's research first, that inherently biases your selection process, right? And so what we did is we've implemented what we now call the vision talk in lieu of the chalk talk, and it's essentially the second thing that candidates do when they arrive for their interview. First thing is they go to breakfast with the department chair, get kind of the lay of the land, then they come to campus, and they meet with as many faculty who are available first thing in the morning, right? And what I stress when coaching the candidates on their visit is that the vision talk should really be reflective of their application packet, right? So yes, you do want to talk about your history, and you want to present your research vision and what your program will look like and who you'll collaborate with and what funding sources are the right direction for you to go. But I also stress to them that it's critical that they carve out time and include multiple slides to talk about their teaching vision and their DEI efforts previously and moving forward, right? So we call it vision talk because it really is intended to allow the candidate to provide their vision for who they will be as a faculty member. How will they shape their programs? What are they committed to, right? What is going to drive them to improve themselves, improve our program, and really carry things forward. And again, it's taken some time to kind of shift that culture and shift that perspective out. It took a long time for faculty to stop calling it a chalk talk, right? Just to get them to call it a vision talk took a pretty significant effort. But by just changing those words and then changing the scope of that meeting, I think it's fundamentally changed candidate interactions with the department. Again, this is the first thing that they do, right? This sets the stage for all of the conversations that they'll have moving forward. And they still have a 50-minute slot sometime later in their visit to really hone in on the research, what they've done and where they see themselves going, right? So in my perspective, there wasn't a need, right, to have two roughly hour-long meetings committed almost entirely to research. Use this as an opportunity for the candidate to showcase who they are, how they fit, and how they're going to help, continue to grow the culture of our department in the direction we want to go.
This is Erin. I just wanted to follow up on that. First off, we too have gotten our departments to implement what Greg has talked about, the Vision Talk. They're really excited about it. This will be the first season they're using it. One of the other things we've done is that either I or my other associate, Dean Helena, meet with every candidate. And we emphasize to them that we are not part of the selection process, that we're there to answer questions. And we spend a lot of the time talking about our mentoring processes and how we use launch committees and they convert to mentoring committees and how it's intentional, and we follow up. And we try to make sure that these are happening regularly so that the candidates know that if they come to our university that they will be supported and that they will be connected. And one of our measures is, are they being put on research grants, and are they being connected to collaborations? And I think that's really, it plays a really big role in recruiting. When candidates do come to our university, they often say that that was a big part. Knowing that they would be included intentionally was really important to them, that they wouldn't be out there on their own. But it's exceptionally important for people that are in marginalized groups. The data says that it's really, they get isolated a lot by their communities and so in the university. And so knowing that we are actively working against that, it's critical if we're actually going to try to recruit people from diverse groups, but it's also an important part of the recruiting process.
This is Shelley. I'm going to echo what Erin and Greg said. We also have transitioned to having a vision talk as well, and not a chalk talk. And we have the seminar on the first day, and then the vision talk on the second day of the interview. The seminar is open to the whole community, but the vision talk is restricted to just other faculty that are involved in the interview. But for the vision talk, we have also changed the format so that it's supposed to start with teaching and diversity, and we give specific guidelines about how long the candidates should spend in the vision talk covering those topics, and then the research comes afterwards. Because in a traditional chalk talk, what you often find is that people spend almost all the time on the research, and then when you have 5 or 10 minutes left, whoever is keeping track of time has to say, oh no, we're running out of time, quick, we have to cover teaching and diversity. And so you get about 5 minutes on those topics. And it's very rushed, and it doesn't feel like it's in depth. And it also conveys that it's not important to us, that if we're saving this to the end and we're not really giving it much time, it's not a big thing. So by moving it up front, we emphasize that this is something important. We do want to talk about this, and we want to make sure we have time, so we're putting it up front. And that has also required some conversations with our faculty, because the response to the first few vision talks in this format was, why are they doing it in this order? This is weird. This isn't how we normally do it. So it did require some conversations with the faculty about, no, this was the instructions the candidates were given. And, and so we did share both, what should you cover, how long should you spend on these things with the candidates, but we also then made sure that that was shared with the faculty as well. And we shared some guidance on how we were going to be evaluating those different areas too. So I think kind of our overwhelming theme has been to try to provide more transparency and more clarity to all the candidates about what are we looking for here, what should this talk or this statement look like. And we've also added this to the, we have a pre-screening short video interview that we do with our list of kind of people who've made it through the full committee review, and then we're trying to narrow it down. We've got a group of maybe 20 people that are really great, but we're not going to, bring 20 people to campus to interview for one slot. So maybe 10 to 20 people in that range. So we do these shorter video interviews, and they're like a half an hour with a couple of committee members. And what we started doing is giving all the candidates the questions ahead of time. And one of the questions is around teaching. So we give them a list of the classes that we want them to think about which ones they might be excited about teaching. And really the philosophy there on giving them the questions ahead of time is, I want to see what someone is like when they're at their best, when they're prepared, when they know what the questions are, when they've had time to think about it and craft thoughtful responses. I want to hear what their thoughts are in that state. and not necessarily the person who either has the best network to get the questions from last year, or or who's just been coached or mentored a bit more. I want to see what someone's thoughts are after they've had time to reflect. So that's kind of, I think, the general theme and approach is transparency and helping everyone be their best self at the interview.
I really like that, just working on limiting barriers, reducing barriers, and letting everyone, present themselves in their best possible light. So thank you for sharing those tips for the interview process. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, and we did touch on this just a teeny bit before, but there's a lot of questions in terms of how do you get, buy-in from other people in your university or your college. So whether that's the faculty, the other faculty in your department, your dean, the provost, the vice provost. So in terms of getting buy-in, there are a few questions related to, how do you get, let me see that I'm wording this correctly. We had a question from Daniel Kavanaugh asking about, how many institutions are only integrating DEI requirements in searches, but not yet in retention and tenure processes, which of course would involve buy-in as well. How do you address the misalignment when a candidate asks why it's part of the application process and not part of retention and tenure? So that's one area that we can start with, but feel free to chime in as well on, more broadly how you get buy-in from your faculty, dean, and provost as well.
This is Erin. I deal with promotion and tenure in my college. So I will say we are trying to make it part of promotion and tenure. We have defined the components for promotion and tenure to be relatively broad to try to embrace different kinds of scholarship. We have community engaged research as one of those, and research is defined with really broadly, purposefully to try to incorporate some of this in it. You're absolutely right, though. If we hire for one thing and tenure for another thing, it makes no sense whatsoever. So you need to really, again, think about what your institution is doing and work to have it be connected. And that can, when you have to go through the different layers with promotion and tenure and changing what's valued in it, that can take a lot of time. So that needs to be something that you think about very early in the process. But I will say I am surprised when I look at the standards for promotion and tenure at many universities, how many of them are actually broader on paper than I think we all think they are until we sit down and, God bless us, read that faculty handbook that someone gave us. And I threw it away when I started, which was a deep mistake. But I think you can see that there are places where it can be brought out at a lot of institutions. And if not, it absolutely needs to be a focus.
This is Shelley. I can jump in here too. We also are trying to incorporate diversity into promotion and tenure, and just like Erin, thinking about ways we can do it in the short term and then ways we can do it in a longer term, broader way. So this past year, the candidates were asked to address diversity and inclusion in their teaching statements. So how they build an inclusive classroom, and also we have a statement on advising and mentoring that candidates also write as part of the promotion. And so those were two areas that candidates were asked to speak specifically to those topics. So we don't have a separate diversity statement, and I think that's kind of a diversity and leadership in diversity and inclusion. I think that's a direction that would be good to move into. I think that's kind of more long-term. The other way that it's being evaluated now too for us is that our top level committee, the presidential committee, which is the final review committee that makes their recommendation to the president, who makes the final decision, they now have a DEI representative on that committee. So that's a new addition this year as well. But I agree that if you say we're looking at these statements just for hiring and then we don't actually care if someone does them once they're hired, it's not going to move the needle. So I think it does have to be something that we continue to evaluate and value for promotion and for merit as well.
Yeah, so this is Greg again. I can't really, I appreciate my colleagues stepping in here. I can't really speak to the TNP process per se, as I haven't been at the backside of it for all that long. But what I can say with regard to buy-in, I want to echo something that Shelley had mentioned recently. We're a large public institution, and you'd be surprised. I've been surprised how easy it is to get leadership on board when you say, hey, we just want to look like the rest of the state, right? We want to look like we're representative of the population in the state, and then provide the evidence that this impacts student enrollment, it impacts student retention, right? These are all things that we care about that are secondary but central, right, to the achieving diversity within our faculty ranks, right? We want our communities, our faculty communities, to look like they're representative of the public at large, right? Or at least those of us who are here on the call certainly note that and are thinking in that direction. And I think that's maybe one of the challenges is finding ways to get past antiquated perspectives on what matters to faculty now and moving forward, right? What do you want to look like? Who do you want to be engaging with? Right? What opportunities do you want to provide? And I think being able to articulate that to leadership, it resonates well, right? It connects really, really smoothly. It's just about putting in the effort to do it. Really, that's been my experience on our side.
Thank you, Greg. And a related question in the chat was, how is this idea of inclusive faculty hiring influenced your department's approach to D&I and how you present your department to the broader candidate pool? And that was asked by Bethany Almeida. So how do you present your department to the broader candidate pool?
Yeah, so, I think one of the things, so I think this is a really good question. And I think this gets back, so very early in the conversation we had in the webinar, we had a question about what practices have we put into place to try and improve the diversity in our applicant pool, right? And I mentioned then that our efforts have been very grassroots, right? We pick up the phone and call people we know. We, as Erin said, we build networks. We oftentimes do that through professional societies. And one of the questions that I've had, and I'll pose this more as a question than an answer, is that, there are professional societies that exist that encompass underrepresented groups, right? Society for Women Engineering, National Society of Black Engineers, just to name a few, right? And a question for us has been, those are clearly a community in which, an environment in which we should be going, right? And conducting our sort of initial search process, letting candidates know that we have an open application, that we're searching for candidates for faculty jobs. But the question for me has been how best to do that, right? What's the right way to build relationships within that community, right? Everyone here in the webinar can see my picture up on the slide right now, right? I am a white male, right? How effective is it for me to go to a conference, the NSBE conference, the SWE conference, right? The Hispanic Professional Engineering Conference, and engage candidates there and tell them how great it would be to be faculty at the University of Florida, right? There are experiences and perspectives that I can't speak to given my experiences and perspectives as a white male. And so, I think there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem here on some level, right? Candidates, I think, on some level want to join communities where they look like they belong, they feel like they belong, right? If your department is made up entirely like people like me, right, does it come across as being a welcoming environment? So, the chicken and egg problem here is that how do you address inequities in your faculty ranks, right? When your faculty ranks are already out of balance, right? And so, I think I don't know. I'd like to hear from the other panelists a little bit about this, but this is a question I think that I've had. This is a reflective question that I've had for some time now, right? Is how do we go beyond our grassroots efforts to increase the applicant pool and really take a concerted, farther-reaching approach, right? By picking up the phone and calling people, we know we're still missing, right, large swaths of potential candidates in this process because we don't know everybody, right? And so, how do we go beyond the meet the faculty sessions at BMES or AICHE or other related meetings and really take a more holistic approach to engaging the broadest population of candidates that are available to us. So I would love to hear from either Shelley or Erin if they have other insights on how to enrich the applicant pool.
This is Erin, and Greg, I certainly hear you. I will say that you're absolutely right. When you're starting with a department that is not diverse, why would you be the first hire to change that? One of the biggest questions I get when I call potential candidates is, is this going to be a welcoming, supportive place? And I think you have to be able to address that and address that with specifics to, start to change things. And again, this is where, knowing your P&T requirements and expectations and knowing what the department values and knowing what the intentional supports are so that faculty can be successful becomes really important. But you're absolutely right. It is, there is a tipping point where it's much easier because the department is diverse. And so it's easier to look and go, well, there must be something there that's right because I can see lots of different kinds of diversity in this department's faculty. So, we have sent people to SWE and to NSBE and to the other conferences. But if we don't send them armed with the information to really explain why people should want to come, I don't know that it helps that much. And rightfully, it shouldn't help that much if all you just sort of say is, we want you, yay. That's not going to, I wouldn't apply to that department.
This is Shelley. I'll just echo what Erin said, that I think that's definitely an area that we still need to do more work, is how to build a better mechanism to reach out to more diverse candidates so that our pools will be more diverse. That's definitely, one of the critical first steps. And I know that I think there are some efforts going on at a national level to try to build some databases of candidates and students and postdocs that are in the pipeline and going to be moving toward the market, so that we have a better way to communicate with people who are interested in positions. I'll just share too that in my experience, when you're starting with not a lot of diversity, the first step is to acknowledge that, you want to change that, and to start putting in the work to educate yourself about how can I make this a more welcoming environment and a more welcoming place, and how can I build a climate and a culture so that when we do recruit more diverse candidates, they will be comfortable and they will be happy and they will feel welcomed.
Thank you. Yes, so building community is such a key part of all of our diversity efforts, and that means different things at different levels. So I appreciate that you bring that up here too. So we have about 5 minutes left in this webinar, and there are two key questions that I'd like to ask of all of our panelists. The first question is, can you reflect on something that you've tried that has not been successful? And then what would you say is a reasonable timeline for realizing diversity at the faculty level? Given that you probably can't hire 10 plus people overnight, so how do you, what would you say your reasonable timeline for realizing diversity at a faculty level is? So anyone can start us off.
This is Erin. I will say that one of the things, we do a lot of training with our faculty on the committees and the faculty more broadly. We talk a lot about diversity, and perhaps others have had better experiences, but I have not yet to see training that fundamentally impacts the values that faculty have in search committees. I have seen pointed questions impact it, and then, do you value this or not? And when people say, well, yes, well, okay, then let's show how you value it and how you're designing rubrics of what we're trying to do. But I haven't seen training be that helpful. And I'm senile as a bat. What was the second part? Forgive me.
What is the reasonable timeline, in your opinion, for realizing diversity at the faculty level?
And I'm going to be a jerk, and I'm going to say it needs to be now, because what I find is, and I know that sounds terrible, but what I find is the moment that people talk about timelines and event horizons and, well, it'll happen and it's going to take this many years, it becomes a way to empower putting it off, which is the last thing that I want to see happen. It does need to be now. If you're doing a search and you don't have a diverse group of applicants and you're not valuing diversity, I really question in the middle of COVID what you're doing, and I question it for myself every day. So I'm sorry, I don't think it is. You may only be hiring one person a year or one person every other year in a department, but if you're not valuing diversity, if that's not showing in your pools every year, I think it's time to stop. Call that a failed search.
Erin, I think that's a great answer. I think maybe another way to pose it is not your timeline, but what's your velocity, right? So, I think that timeline, you're right. I think timeline leaves open the door for it to become flexible, right? It leaves open the door for it to be pushed off in the interest of other things. And, really, if change is going to be realized, it has to have, you have to be moving incrementally in time, right? And so what's the pace or rate of that change? And so, I agree with you. I think maybe the reflective question, right, is one hire per year, one hire every other year sufficient, right? And if that's the rate at which change can happen, how do we ensure commitment to this change, right? Perspectives, opinions, pressures change with time, right? And how do we ensure this? How do we ensure that these are long-term commitments, right? What changes do we think we can make that will ensure continued efforts in this space? And so then that gets me back to the question on failed practices. And I would absolutely echo what you said, Erin. We've tried implementing training, ensuring that people know what it actually means we're an equal opportunity employer, right? What does that actually mean? There are a lot of misconceptions about what equal opportunity employer actually means and how that pertains to the search process. And ensuring a diverse candidate pool is actually the most appropriate way, right, to maintain an equal opportunity status. And so, training has been one-off training has been difficult, right? It hasn't really been successful in our experience. What's been, I think, more successful is this sort of repeated reminder. This is what's important to us. This is where we want to go. This is why we're doing it, and sort of building up momentum amongst the faculty behind that perspective by hearing it again and again from the folks that are on the committee.
Yeah, this is Shelley. I want to echo that. Yeah, that it's a process, and I think I really am with Erin in this feeling that it has to be now. And I know when we review candidates at the end, when we vote to make offers, we don't rank candidates. We vote on who we are excited about making an offer to. And if I have multiple people that we are excited to make an offer to, then I go and ask to make more offers, especially if it's a diverse, awesome candidate. We just need to make more offers. And, it's my problem, it's the dean's problem, it's POA's problem to find the money to do that. But we need to go after it. We need to, when we've got great people who are excited about us, we need to seize the moment. We don't always convert because these are awesome people who are getting lots of offers everywhere, but we've got to go after it. You will never hire the person that you do not make an offer to, that you do not interview. You've got to get to the offer stage, and so it's a challenge. But I agree, we gotta move on it now. So we have to keep pushing, and I think the big thing is to get to critical mass. And what that is depends on how big your department is. If you have a department of 20 people and you have 4 people that represent a group, that is a huge, part of the voices of that department. The woman, when I was the only woman in a department for a long time, that felt really isolating. But when you're in a department that has, 4 or more women, it makes a huge difference, if there's about 20 faculty. So I think having enough voices to echo and amplify concerns and not having to be the only one to speak out makes such a huge difference. So I think once you get to that critical mass, it becomes much easier to keep building. So I think we have to keep working. I realize that we're not going to hire 10 faculty overnight, but we do have to kind of seize the moment whenever we can and push to move a little faster.
Thank you for all of your insights. We are basically out of time. We went over a few minutes, and I thank you all for staying on with us. And I do want to just sort of recap a few themes that kept coming up. Is that all our panelists were talking about a lot of efforts, a lot of strong efforts from the departments, from the faculty, from the search committees, a lot of effort to develop these applicant pools, a lot of efforts to develop stronger sort of values within the department and make sure that the department is aligned so that the search committees then are better prepped basically to realize the importance of diversity and diversity at every stage of the faculty hiring process. So it does sound like it's a lot of work, but the work can pay off. And so thank you all for, taking your time and providing your insights and being candid in terms of, what works well, what doesn't work well, and what you think we need to be doing to be better. So I really appreciate everyone's time from the panelist perspective, but I also want to say thank you to the audience who left us with a lot of great questions, and we didn't get to all of the questions, but thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We will have additional webinars related to the faculty hiring and candidate process in the future. We hope this is just the first of these types of webinar, so please keep your eye out for more announcements in the future. And let's give our panelists and our BMES staff who helped us out today, Ryan, let's give them all a thank you, either in the chat or give them a high five next time you see them. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate it.